Hey everybody, in today's video I want to discuss why we should explore the second and third order consequences when we decide to do something or we make any decision and choose a course of action on how to proceed on that decision. And specifically I'm going to be talking about this in the context of human movement, as is my specialty. And specifically for this video I'm going to reference powerlifting, because most of you that are interested in this type of information are either a powerlifter or an athlete. And I think powerlifting is a great example to explain what I'm talking about here. Now, what do I mean when I talk about second and third order consequences for our actions and decisions? Well, taking powerlifting as an example, I know many of you might be powerlifters. Let's say we're deciding how we're going to construct our block of programming, right? Now, how are we going to make this decision? Now, of course, we're going to have our priorities, but even when it comes to priorities, there's a time scale for priorities, meaning that it might be your priority to get as strong as possible, right? But what is your time scale for that decision, for the implementation of the actions that are going to get you to that goal? Do you care about being the strongest possible version of yourself as strong as possible? Because that's going to be a much longer term goal than something that's going to be, well, I want to be as strong as possible in this year. And you're going to take different approaches for those. And what I would like you to explore is, I want you to go one step further than this. I want you to think, well, what are the second and third order consequences? Now, what I mean by that is, let's say that you decide, I want to get as strong as possible, as fast as possible, versus, I want to get as strong as possible in the long term, which is ultimately going to be a higher ceiling, right? It's going to be slower, but higher. Now, that's your decision. It's up to you. But what are the second and third order consequences of this? So let's say our goal is to get as strong as possible, as quickly as possible. Now, we're probably going to approach our programming with something that's hyper specific, high volume, high frequency, lots of work, really, and it's going to be pretty intense. Now, the thing about this is, what is the second and third order consequence of that? The second order consequence might be, well, this is definitely going to be much more intensive, not just from a time perspective and energy perspective, which time is, I guess, a form of energy, but it's going to be more taxing even from a recovery perspective. From a perspective of what else do you have going on in your life, it's going to take away more. And it might even go against if you also had the goal, I want to get as strong as possible in my old life. Well, if you take this approach, this quick approach, right, the second and third order consequence of that might be, well, it might be too much fatigue and your tissues aren't ready to handle it. You might not have built the structural capabilities to be able to handle that type of work. You might not be ready for it. It might lead to injury, which might then further derail you from that longer goal, right? And maybe even the shorter goal, because who knows what kind of injury it will be. And I'm not saying that you will get injured. It's not that it's going to happen. It's a possibility. And it's based on these second and third order consequences. Now, there's another one. Now let's go to third. Now this is even more further removed from the initial decision-making criteria that we as humans, that's usually just how we operate. We tend to see, okay, well, this is what's here now, and we tend to get fixed in that, and we're not able to see beyond that. Now, third order consequence of this might be, well, okay, let's say this is taking away extra time, extra energy, whatever. A third order consequence might also just be that, hey, you end up having a higher level of, let's say, just say joint fatigue and perceptions of pain on a day-to-day basis. This might make you more irritable, might affect your social relations. You might not even think that your powerlifting training has anything to do with social relations. But now let's say you're chronically always achy and stuff because you wanted to get the maximum amount of progress as fast as possible, and you not saying that you overexerted, but this comes with the territory. You're gonna be achy and you're gonna have joint fatigue if you're training in that manner for a long enough time, right? And that depends on who you are. Some people might not even be able to handle it. Like, for example, this is where other factors come into play, like my connective tissue, my joints. I would never take that approach now. I have taken it in the past, and it led to lots of pain, lots of injury, and ultimately just setbacks, more setbacks, you know? So I think it's very important, if we're going to be undertaking any type of long-term goal, we want to see the behaviors and actions that build us towards that long-term goal. What are their second and third order consequences? And do those support the completion of that long-term goal? Or are they short-term thinking, and they're ultimately going to either not derail us from that goal, but might even take longer, and it might lower our ceiling for what we might achieve in the long term. But remember, guys, always take account second and third order consequences anytime that you are implementing any action plan towards any goal, but especially when it comes to behaviors that are going to be habitual in any systems that you're building, because these second and third order consequences compound far more than just you would expect. Like, for example, another example, in the example of eating, you, let's say, have a certain body composition or aesthetic goal, and you're hungry right now. Well, I'm hungry right now. I want to eat something. Okay, well, there's a donut here and there's a steak here. When you're really hungry, you know, you're not going to be operating from that rational, long-term thinking state. It's just not going to be what's going on. This is why you need to condition into yourself always looking for those second and third order consequences. Because guess what? What if that donut just happens to be from some special donut shop, and it ends up becoming the most delicious donut you've ever eaten in your life? And now you can't stop thinking about that donut. Now it becomes a habit that you go to this place once a week. It might not make a difference. The donut might just be 300, 400 calories, whatever it is. But if you start going over and over, it becomes a behavior that you repeat, that becomes a habit, and now these things are compounding with time. So remember, guys, these second and third order consequences are often more important than the immediate criteria and the immediate goals that we're seeking to fulfill in that given moment. So always think of the second and third order consequences, especially when building systems and habits and going after long-term goals.